Good morning again, and this is the final discussion of Paradise Lost, the issues of Paradise Lost. I've titled this The Themes of Paradise Lost, Milton's uh, themes in Paradise Lost, rather. Now, the first theme that we need to realize is the idea of Christianity and the idea of God in Paradise Lost. Now, Milton, of course, as we know, was a Puritan, and he was not in favor of the Reformation at all. Now, within this uh, Christian theological structure, therefore, Milton provides an idea of good and evil, and therefore, the theme of the fall of man becomes the highlight of Paradise Lost. You see, it is important for us to understand that post Renaissance and post the Galilean worldview or the Copernican worldview, it is important to understand that man becomes the center of Paradise Lost, the fall of man. And to provide a degree of independence to man, as different from the medieval worldview, Milton does not include or subscribe to the idea of predestination, as it were, in the rigorously Calvinistic sense. He rather inculcates a doctrine of the free will, where God is seen as this benevolent monarch or patriarch who provides both the angels and the son of and his own creation Adam the right to choose. Now, this right to choose is very important as a theme for Paradise Lost. It is because of his choice that Satan falls. It is because of her choice that Eve tastes the fruit of knowledge, and it is by choice that man falls. Now, God is seen as a repository of wise reason. As I keep on pointing out, Milton suggests within the 18th century worldview or the late 17th century worldview, in the preeminence of the human reason. The God is the embodiment of perfect reason, who creates obedience as a rational kind of a trope through which man will not be led astray. And then there's the false rationality of Lucifer or Satan, his justification of rationality, of a devious kind of a rationality, to declare an eternal enmity between good and evil, and his use of a persuasive kind of or a perverted kind of rationality to seduce Eve. So Milton is suggesting that the human being, as well as the angels, are imbued with rationality, and with this rationality, they are free to make a kind of a freedom of choice, free will. And finally, of course, God is benevolent in the sense that despite the tribulations and the fall of man, he allows the Son of God, right, who is Jesus Christ, to regain paradise for man. So there are ideas here which are very complex, ideas of divinity and God, ideas of rationality and the free will, and the idea of mercy in the rescuing people from in the rescuing of man from damnation. So these themes are welded into Paradise Lost, Book One, and subsequently. Now, also another important theme is this theme of what we can call disobedience, right? So, what are the consequences and rationalities of disobedience? Now, Milton will begin Paradise Lost by singing of man's first disobedience so that he can assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to man. Therefore, three components: man's disobedience, eternal providence, and the justification of the ways of God to man. Right. So, Milton then suggests, of course, that uh, there is this tripartite kind of a division where you have heaven on top, then there is chaos. Later on, we will have generated earth, and you have hell at the end of things. This hierarchical structure of the universe is also sort of manifested in the hierarchy of the existent beings: God at the top, Satan at the bottom, and as it were, Adam in middle. Uh, of course, again, uh, God in the Miltonic sense is also the Jehovic God. His laws are our laws, says Abdiel in Book 5. And this idea of freedom also, and of Eve's rationality, is again linked with this breakdown of the hierarchy of the universe, right? And Eve then eats the fruit so that it may render me more equal. For who, and then adds, for inferior, who is free? Uh, for inferior, who is free? So there is this clash between the word of God and the desire to contravene, to disobey for the sake of freedom. Milton seems to suggest that freedom is linked also to the hierarchy, and that in following a false trail of reason, Eve has lost paradise, right? And similarly, Adam, knowingly, when he eats the fruit of knowledge and he is eternally bonded with Eve, has knowingly disputed the word of God. Now, the other thing that Milton, of course, talks about is freedom. And this is what has muddled the idea, somewhere made Milton a bit ambivalent for readers. Now, you will find that Milton was stridently a campaigner against the monarchy, and he talked about democracy and freedom, in particular in the ready and easy way to establish a free commonwealth, whose theme was the dangers of monarchy in a world of rational and free creatures. Therefore, in this ready and easy way, Milton repeatedly suggests that monarchy is stupid, useless, superficial, and false, and that the monarch would have little else to do, and I'm quoting Milton here, but to bestow the eating and drinking of excessive dainties, a pompous face upon the superficial actings of the state, unquote. Now, it's interesting in the sense that uh, Milton talks about this ready and easy way, ending the dedication, suggesting that I trust I shall have spoken persuasion to an abundance of sensible and ingenuous men, justly and timely fearing to what a precipice of destruction this deluge of madness would hurry us, deluge of madness in kingship, through the general defection of misguised and abused multitude. Now, interestingly, Satan seems to embody, at least in the beginnings of Paradise Lost, this element of freedom. So in book one, he stands in this newly constructed palace and says, "Meet though just right, and the fixed laws of heaven did first create your leader. Next, free choice, established in a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent." So Satan seems to be this leader whom the angels have chosen by free consent. And therefore, the God of Paradise Lost, at least in book one, according to Satan, is a prototype of Charles I, the monarch, who is there by hierarchy and therefore whose hierarchy needs to be dismantled. Now, Satan tries to draw upon this idea of rationality in hell. It suggests where with this advantage, then, I'm quoting, to union and firm faith and firm accord. Now, this firm faith and firm accord are very interesting phrases, especially fraught within the contemporary discourse of the period, more than can be in heaven. So, hell is seen as even more democratic than heaven. And therefore, uh, this has led to you know, uh, the romantics, especially Blake and Shelley, pointing out that Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it, and that he was creating Satan as a kind of a Promethean figure who was always protesting against God's tyranny. However, in book 4, Gabriel, when he meets Satan, condemns Satan, saying, "Thou sly hypocrite, who now would seem patron of liberty, who more than thou once fawned and cringed, and servilely adored heaven's awful monarch." So Gabriel is suggesting that Satan was equally a follower, now who pretends to be on the side of liberty. And he also suggests, of course, that Satan, by abrogating leadership, and he has created the same structure of monarchy, obedience, tyranny within hell that God had apparently created in heaven. So, in that sense, Satan is not a figure of freedom at all. Rather, he equally sort of accepts tyranny, and his role as the Sultan in the Sultan is a figure that of uh, tyranny that Milton uses with references to Satan. Now, therefore, this this entire text has an ambivalence of theme. Now, in the classical hierarchy, Satan as the epic hero who confronts power and engages in an indefinite battle showing enormous bravery would be a matter of great pride. It's the pride of Satan, which is also the theme, that he will never bow down to God, right? Better to reign in heaven, in hell than to serve in heaven. So that pride in the classical worldview is seen as heroic. But within the Christian worldview, this pride of Satan is seen as something which is sinful. And Milton addresses this ambivalence by suggesting that Satan has made an association with a catalogue of gods, which has its own purpose in Paradise Lost. For example, Moloch. For example, Mammon or Belial, They highlight how Satan's moral universe is antithetical to that of God. Instead of God's hope, instead of God's mercy, which is shown at the end of the text, instead of God's willingness to allow uh, Adam and Satan the rationality and freedom of choice, Milton's Satan will goad his followers into the path of evil practices, greed for power, and also, sodomy and all kinds of sexual and moral excesses. So we need to see not only Satan, but Satan's followers and the kind of moral universe that they create in Paradise Lost, Book One. So, what am I trying to suggest? I'm trying to suggest that we can take a look at Milton's themes sheerly in terms of politics, where you see the god of Satan seems to be an ambivalent god, a tyrannical god who rules with his thunder and casts out any pretender into hell. And that Satan becomes this kind of a democrat who would lead this march against tyranny and the monarchy. And therefore, Milton's poem seems to be greatly influenced by Oliver Cromwell, and therefore, has, despite being a Christian epic, has a moral ambiguity. On the other hand, if we take Paradise Lost in its entirety and see God as this benevolent patriarch who affords a democracy of freedom of choice, and even at the end of the fall of man provides a way to mercifully forgive him, then we realize that Satan's the ambiguity of Paradise Lost dissolves, and therefore God is seen as the true rational being, not only rational being, but also the true merciful being who will provoke democracy and free will within man. Therefore, these themes of, these themes of rationality, the theme of power and tyranny, the theme of disobedience and resistance become crucial in Paradise Lost, not only because of a theological sense, but also urgent in terms of the contemporary historical political situation. As we know, Milton was, in many ways, a figurehead of the free will, and therefore he showed the free will of God and the free will of and the decision of Satan. But being this devout Christian Puritan that he was, he also saw Satan's universe as marked by greed and lust and other excesses, and therefore something to be condemned. So it is within this ambit of faith and politics, between religious righteousness and rebelliousness, given the contemporary political situation, that the themes of Milton's Paradise Lost are located. So these are the major themes of Paradise Lost. We can, of course, talk about bravery. We could talk about Satan's determination, and so on and so forth. But these are minor themes. The more major themes are these political issues which are latent in Paradise Lost, Book One. Right. It is with then that we have come to the end of our discussion of Paradise Lost. We started off with a detailed annotation of the text, went through the poem through different classes. We've taken the allusions, we've alerted you to how Milton uses a wide range of allusions in Paradise Lost. We have alerted you to this question of the ambiguity of power and the status of God and Satan in Paradise Lost, how Milton's latent sympathies seem to be with the cause of the rebel angels, although seen in a greater context, it proves to be false. We've seen how Milton creates or merges the elements of the classical and the Christian epic. We've seen how Milton creates this galaxy of fallen angels to suggest the kind of puritanical fall that Satan has and the consequences of the disobedience of uh, of man. We've seen how the invocation has functioned, and we've seen that at this point of time, when Book One ends, all the archangels are in a formation, listening within the hall, great hall of pandemonium, to Satan's counsel for the next kind of action. We already have a premonition because Satan has suggested that he's heard rumors that a new species of creatures are being created by God, and therefore the next project, great project of Satan, will be to seduce Eve in the fourth book of Paradise Lost. But that then is for another day. For now, we will wind up these classes and bring my teaching of this paper in the semester to a close. For all students who have listened in patiently, a very big thank you and all the best for your final semester examinations. I'll end the broadcast at this point. Thank you for your attention.